Welcome everyone to April Hill Conservation and Education Center, home of Greenagers, and home today of Fodder, Stories from the Field. My name is Will Conklin, Executive Director of Greenagers, and Greenagers has the privilege of being the owner and steward of April Hill, where we run our youth programs to connect folks with the land, with each other, and with the skills that they want to learn and take forth into the world. I could say much more about that mission, but I won't. Find me afterwards if you'd like to know more. And similarly, if you'd like to know more about the 4 other organizations that have graciously come together to put this event on, please do. They are Multicultural Bridge, they are the Farmsteads for Farmers, a project of the Berkshire Community Land Trust, Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, and Berkshire Grown. Just a round of applause for all of those. And to my mind, that's one of the best parts about an event like this is when a number of organizations can come together and bring all of their strengths to the table, as well as all the people that find something to follow, something to believe in what they do. And then we can find all the through lines. And hopefully we see those in these stories. And before I hand it off to Sheela Clary, our wonderful MC for the day, who is cultivating an amazing community of storytellers in this area, just this morning I happened to be reading in a book that, argument never really changed anyone's mind, but a good story could. And so hopefully that happens today, not in an adversarial sense, but just in a change for growth sense. So Sheela, I'll leave it to you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm Sheela Clary, and I am a local teacher and storyteller and writer. My soon-to-be branded series of classes and events was going to be called Shire Stories, so keep an eye out for that. Is this thing right in my face? Yes. It is. You want to lower it? Yeah, can I lower it a little bit? I mean, you are a foot taller than me, so yeah.
That's why I'm standing at the side. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, great. Now I'm a crooner from the 50s. Okay, cool. So I, first of all, like in line of what Will just said, like going back to Sesame Street, like the letter for the day is C for collaboration. Like this is just such a incredible model of collaboration. I have a beautiful country I think you guys should lead. Can I interest you in it? So my job today, most of my job has already been done. I've been workshopping these stories with these brave storytellers over the past couple of months, over the phone, in person, over Zoom, whole mix of things. So you're going to hear a broad range of stories from a broad range of experiences. As you will see, my only job today is just to keep things going. So I'm just going to introduce each storyteller very briefly. We have 9 storytellers for you today. 9? And at the end, we're going to go right through, and then we'll have social time at the end for you to learn more about the organizations they represent. So, without further ado, I am going to introduce our first storyteller, who is a local legend of Lawson Brook Farm in Monterey. Please welcome Susan Sellew.
Woo! Well, I'm going to tell a story about the beginning of Lawson Brook Farm. Can I stand this far back from this? Otherwise I can't see the people, and I want to talk to the people. So I was a homesteader in the early 70s, one of those back to the lander types. And I'm going to tell this story, and I'm going to use we quite a bit. And I'm referring to my former husband, Wayne, and co-creator of Lawson Brook Farm when I say we at the creating of this. So we were living in an old farmhouse in Maine when I bought my first 2 goats. And they were Eunice and Vengetta. Eunice was a 4-month-old sweet little thing who used to like to curl up on my lap, and she was very sweet. And Vengetta was a jet black 2-year-old first freshener who had a huge personality. She was an escape artist, and she was very mischievous. And I loved them both. I just loved them both. Shortly thereafter, we had the opportunity to get together with some other folks and buy a farm in northern New York, up in St. Lawrence County. And with them, we bought a 260-acre farm for $21,000. Needless to say, there were other back-to-the-landers like us buying. And shortly thereafter, the Amish were moving in. But at any rate, Wayne and I had the house, the dairy barn, the horse barn, the garage, and 60 of the acres. And that gave us room and opportunity to do whatever in the homesteading realm. We had every kind of animal you could imagine. We grew everything. It just was huge. And then I met a French woman from Montreal, and she had come over to teach a cheese-making class for the St. Lawrence County Agricultural Extension. Well, it was more of a workshop. It went on. And she was wanting to teach people in North America how to make French Chev. Nobody was doing that. There was talk of a Laura Chanel in California, but she hadn't started yet. And and I don't know what she was doing up there doing that, because nobody had goats except me, maybe. But I worked with her, and I got making a fresh Chev that I just thought was delicious. And I realized that there would be no market in this St. Lawrence County where we were because of the poverty. And I think we were both a little homesick, and we decided to move home. So we came back to Monterey. We tried to find a situation where we could, have some land and stuff, but that wasn't possible. And my father suggested that we take a parcel off of a plot he had in Monterey that was given to him by his grandfather when he was a young man. So it had kind of been in our family for a long time. The caveat was that it was all woods. So we started Rosenberg Farm from woods. And Wayne was good with a chainsaw. I was good at sloughing limbs over to fires. We started fires each day because you had to burn all the junk, otherwise you'd never get around. And 83 days later, we had about 6 or 7 acres open. We had stacked the hardwood, mostly cherry, and sold it as firewood so that we'd have enough money to pay the bulldozer operator to then pop all the stumps. That was quite an operation. And then Wayne set up a sawmill and milled up the pine that we had cut. And he would bring it over, and I kind of nailed it up in the shape of a barn. So, that was the way that went. And it took a really long time. At one point, we even thought we'd cut the shingles to go on the roof, not split them, but cut them out around the knots in this pasture pine. We got the front of the stable part of the barn done and said, this is way too much work. So we put metal on the back, where we couldn't see it. So the hard part was getting the rooms ready that needed to be inspected to sell this product legally. And there was no internet then. It was really hard to do the research. The inspectors didn't know what to tell us because they'd never seen anything quite like this. It was very different. And at a certain point, I got antsy, and I started making some cheese in my kitchen and going out and sampling it out. I'd say, oh, would you like to taste this cheese I make? And then after they swallowed it, I'd say, I make it with goat's milk. Because Chev was not yet, wasn't quite there. And so, and I sold it self-service out of my kitchen refrigerator. One day I came down from the barn, and there were 3 people I didn't know sitting on my couch having a great time, and somebody shopping in the refrigerator. And we did stay at the farm in that self-service mode the whole while because it was such an honor to people in the long run, as I look back, to know that they were trusted. So, and then we got our license in 1983. We started that clearing the winter of '79. It had to be snow on the ground to do that clearing, to start all those fires and stuff. So '83, we got our license. And I had designed the barns and everything for 25 milking goats. I thought that was the exact perfect size, and I was so sure I was right that for the business, and that would be just right. And so we started making, we had 25 goats fresh in that spring, and we made about 175 pounds of cheese a week. And I could easily sell that much cheese. All I had to do was go sample it at a couple of the cheese shops and or the restaurants, and it was very easy locally to sell that cheese. And at the end of the year, when we tallied it up, we didn't even break even. And that wasn't counting our salaries in there. It was counting just operating expenses. And I go, oh, jeepers. And then I had to realize that, well, I guess we'll have to try to be a little bigger. So we added some more goats every year, and for the next maybe 3 years, we hit the sweet spot. And it turned out that I was only 100% off in my estimation. And the sweet spot was 50 milking goats, and we made maybe 450 pounds of cheese a week. And one of the things that is a great honor to me is that I got to do something. You know, we barely made enough money to live on, but it didn't matter because I was gifted with having a day that I could do stuff that used my creativity, my curiosity, my just everything. It just wasn't, I mean, it was work. It was a lot of work, but whatever. And especially after Wayne left, the last 20 years I ran it myself. We went 40 years with this chef, this Monterey chef. But I had people come and work with me that were just the highlight of my life. We call them the farm family. I got my eyes on one of them right back there. Hannah worked with me for 11 years, and she worked with me till the end. There was a time that I sustained a physical injury, and we had to quit, and that's why that's why there was no more chef. But Hannah, and I'm not sure who else. I see that my electrician is here, who helped a lot. But it was just a great honor to have made that chef and to have it be so good and have people like it and have people whine at me all the time about the end.
Susan, where are you? Can we get another round of applause for Susan Sellew, everybody? How many fans of Rostenbrook Farm Chef have we got here? The whole room, practically. Wonderful. All right. Moving right along, our next storyteller comes to us via Holiday Brook Farm. Please welcome Dicken Crane to the stage.
I've always loved telling stories, and so I immediately thought, oh, this is perfect. I want to do this. But actually realizing that I was going to actually do it, it makes me a little nervous. But my story's about growing up on a farm. And one of the things that my siblings and our friends had basically the run of the farm all summer. Adults, parents or otherwise, really paid very little attention to what we were doing. I remember my younger sister recently telling me that she was pretty sure that our mom never knew where she was the whole summer. But it was, a great opportunity for us kids to learn about nature. And, we all got tetanus shots, like boosters every year, because growing up on farms, there was the high risk of manure and rusty nails and things that would give you tetanus. So having boosters regularly gave my parents faith that we weren't going to get tetanus. And we were always trying to figure out how to, how nature worked, how to catch frogs. And we had a pond, and that was one of our favorite places. But we had sheep, and it didn't really occur to us that the reason we had sheep was to keep the grass around the pond mowed. And to us, it was just a nuisance that they had to be around the pond. not so much the sheep, but the ram. It was the ram that was the real challenge. And we tried to scheme ways that we could get to the pond and not get chased out by the ram, but we frequently were making mad dashes for the fence, and sometimes with some assistance from the ram, flew over it. And it was, but at the sort of end of summer, and we're back in school, and maybe we see each other on skiing or something, we kind of forgot about the ram. But during that winter, there were cows on the farm, my grandfather's cows, and they occasionally got out. And it was this one night that the cows were out. My brother and I got, woken up and stuffed into boots and parkas and sent out to help my father get the cows back in. And so he gave us instructions that when the cows came running up the lane, to stand there, make yourself big, throw your arms in the air, and don't run. And while it seemed unlikely that this would work, we went and stood where we were supposed to stand, and the cows came stampeding up the lane. My brother just bolted for the fence. But I stood there, and I was like, make yourself look big, throw your arms in the air, don't run. And sure enough, the cows turned and went through the gate and into where they were supposed to go. And I had such an adrenaline rush. I felt like a superhero. I could probably do anything if I could do that. So as the next spring came, and our friends came around the farm, and we were hanging out in front of the sheep pen, and it occurred to me, this was my chance to show how I had this superpower. And I was sort of explaining to my friends about what we were doing wrong was we were running, don't run. And I climbed over the fence and looked at that ram, and for a second I was afraid he sensed my superpower and he wasn't going to do anything. But no, he came full bore, and I'm ready for this rush of adrenaline, and that he's going to stop, and then there's nothing. And when I came to, my friends were all gathered around me to see if I was okay. And as I was sort of getting things back in focus, I realized that they weren't saying anything, but I had this sense that they really thought there was something wrong with me. Because why would I climb over that fence right in front of that ram when I knew exactly what he was going to do? He's going to knock me out. And I did it anyway. And I just had this feeling that they didn't know the experience I'd had with the cows. But what I realized that I think has stuck with me for years is this sort of counterintuitive nature of nature. That because it was intuitive to me that if I could stop a stampeding herd of cows, I could stop that ram. All I had to do was not run. But nature isn't intuitive. And it's just one of the examples that I've come to realize is that there is such a counterintuitive nature to nature. And at our peril, we don't recognize it. And so that was one of my growing up stories.
I'm so glad you lived to tell the tale. Well told, well told. Awesome. All right, great. So our next story is going to be told with translation, simultaneous translation up here at the microphone. So please welcome up to the mic Gwendolyn Van Sant, who will serve as the translator, and our storyteller Ana Luisa Quizphi.
Yo soy de padres indígenas, ecuatorianos, agrícolas.
So I'm a daughter of indigenous agricultural farmers in Ecuador.
Mis padres nos enseñaron al trabajo duro y ser fuertes.
Her parents taught her how to work hard and to have a lot of strength.
En mi país sembrábamos de todo, en especial sembrábamos el maíz, los frijoles y las papas.
Okay, I have notes. All right, in our country, we seeded a lot of plants. We did, I lost it already.
De maíz.
Oh, thank you. Gracias. Corn, beans, and potatoes.
Eso cosechábamos cada 5 a 6 meses.
So we harvested every 5 to 6 months.
Pero también sembrábamos vegetales y flores, que eso cosechábamos todo el año completo.
So we also did other vegetables and flowers that we did for the whole year.
Mi padre nos enseñó que debemos tener el amor propio para poder dar a los demás.
So our father taught her that you have to have love, the appropriate amount of love to give more.
Y el amor propio di en cuenta que también tenemos que dar amor a nuestra tierra.
And that love counts up into giving love to the land.
Y ese amor me ha llegado acá a Great Barrington y a Wendell.
And this love brought her all the way here to Great Barrington and to Gwendolyn.
Y gracias a ella hemos compartido muchos vegetales, muchas frutas, y ella nos ha brindado un pedacito de tierra para poder cultivar.
Okay, I'm getting a little old for this, my memory. So thanks to me, we've been able to grow vegetables and, repeat that, por favor.
En
flowers.
flowers.
Y-
Con ella empezamos algo pequeño.
Yeah, and with that, we started with something really small.
Hoy en día tenemos más grande.
Now it's much bigger.
El amor que nosotros hemos dado a la tierra, hubo frutos.
The love that we gave the land has given fruit.
Hemos sembrado de todo
We've seeded everything,
y todo cosechamos.
and we've harvested everything.
En especial sembramos flores.
Especially we seeded flowers, we planted flowers.
Y en esas flores hubo de toda clase de flores donde
Yeah. And with these flowers, there were all types of flowers.
donde que cuando usted llega al jardín y ve la maravilla de flores que nos da ese pequeño espacio que tenemos, nos da más amor, nos quita el estrés y nos da más felicidad para seguir trabajando en el jardín.
Okay, so when you come to the farm, you'll see this marvelous display of flowers, and that really represents all of the love at the farm. And it helps alleviate stress, it helps give everybody more motivation to continue.
Y yo personalmente agradezco a Wendolyn y a todos ustedes por estar aquí presentes.
And I want to thank everybody, Gwendolyn, and all of you for being here and being present with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
En este papelito que tenemos aquí,
So on this paper that we have here,
la parte de acá es donde que comenzamos nosotros a cultivar la tierra, a trabajar.
this is the part up here where we start preparing the land, tilling the land.
It's in Ecuador.
In
Yeah.
Ecuador.
En la parte, así comenzamos y acá empezamos a sembrar.
And this is where she shows you how it moves from here to what it looks like when it's all cleared. And this is from where Ana is in Ecuador.
En Ovejir es el maíz, que le saca, que le limpiamos todo
Yeah,
el
yeah.
área.
So this is an example of the corn and how well it's been weeded. That's the,
Y de aquí es las papas que solamente se siembra de esa manera.
and up here in the mountains is where you see the potatoes growing.
En Ovejil es la cosecha de las alberjas y los vegetales.
And here's some beans and some vegetables also that are harvested where she came from.
Y aquí están los choclos.
Yeah, here's the corn.
Ya. Y aquí tenemos lo que yo sembré en el jardín. Todo esto, on the bridge, las flores, toda clase de flores y los vegetales.
So, and then down below, this is all what she's been able to do in Solidarity Garden with the vegetables and the flowers and the beans.
Entonces esto para mí significa mucho amor.
And this whole drawing here means love to Anna.
Thank you.
Can we get one more round of applause, please, for Anacia and Gwen? The photos are so lovely, and they show such a lovely journey from one part of the world to the next, too. All right, our next storyteller is a familiar face around here, and who is of late working at Nature Works. And she's figuring out other fun things to do in the world. So please welcome up here Maeve Wilber.
Okay. So there have been a handful of times throughout my years farming when I stop and think, I can't believe this is my job and this is what I'm being paid to do. Like spending 6 hours of my day just washing, spinning, and packing salad greens, or getting to harvest flowers and make bouquets for community events, or more broadly, just spending almost every day outside. But one day that really sticks out to me when I thought about this was the day that I witnessed a pig autopsy. I had been working at Mill River Farm. Sorry. It does get a little bit graphic, but it's okay. I had been working as Mill River Farm's livestock manager for about 6 months at this point, and I had very minimal livestock experience before transitioning into this role. And after a few very brief training days, I was given free rein of taking care of lots of pasture-raised animals, like 100 turkeys, 250 broiler hens, 600 laying hens, as well as 2 guardian dogs, 20 feeder pigs, 2 boars, and 4 sows. So I show up for the farm this morning in February, ready to do my chores, and I always took care of the birds first. Since it was the winter, we didn't have any turkeys or broilers, and our laying hens were in a greenhouse for their winter housing, so the birds went quickly that morning. And when I moved on to the pigs, I began to load up the tractor as I always did, with all the grain I would need, a paddle, a hose, and lots of extra feed bowls. The pigs were also in their winter pens, so all of our feeder pigs were together. 1 boar was on his own, 2 pregnant sows were each in their own pen, and our last pen was 1 boar with 2 sows. This was the pen that I like to go to first because the boar has been aggressive to me in the past, and especially now with 2 females in there, I like to get in and out of there. So as I'm driving up to the pen, I can see them all cuddled together in their hut with 1 sow flanked on either side by her pen mates. And as I get closer, the boar and sow on either side jump up and rush to the gate ready for their morning grain. But the second sow is still laying in the hut, and I instantly know that something is not right. She had been acting odd the last couple of days, and I had told my managers about these weird behaviors like not eating as much and laying around, but there really wasn't much we could do, knew nor what to do to help her, and so I feared that whatever was going on may have just happened overnight. So before checking on her, I filled the grain bowls for the other 2 and dropped them in the pen as far as I could from the hut. And when I walked in there, I put my hand on her side, and she still felt warm, so I gave her a little nudge, but she didn't move. And as I moved around her, I put my hand on her back and felt that she was completely cold. And the only reason she felt warm was from her pen mates sandwiching her overnight. So I rushed back to the farmhouse to get my managers to figure out what to do. And Peter, the farm owner, and Cody, the farm manager, come out with me. Peter instantly hops on the phone with Co-Pig Vet because they used to have, maybe still do have, a large animal vet who could come out to the farm to see what was going on. So he set up for a vet to come by that afternoon to perform an autopsy so we could know what happened and in case it was something we needed to worry about for the other animals. Once that was all set, Cody and I started working on getting our sow out of there. So Cody, well, first we rearranged the electric fence so our other two were cornered off and wouldn't come near her. And then he went and got the skid steer and brought it into the hut. And we got the bucket lined up right next to her, but where she was laying was where they often slept, and we didn't want to just scoop out a huge chunk of dirt underneath her, so we need to just like shimmy her up a little bit. And at first we just got behind her and pushed as hard as we could, but she's like 350 pounds of dead weight, so she didn't move at all. So eventually we shifted her head on first and then her legs, and we were able to scoop her up and out of there, leaving her in the bucket for when the vet arrived. In the meantime, I went on and finished the rest of my chores with the other pigs. So the vet arrived at some point after lunch in a Toyota Tacoma, fully stocked with tools, gauze, iodine, anything you could need for the autopsy. And our sow was still laying in the bucket on her back with her legs up in the air. And the vet asked for our assistance. So I stood at her head, holding her front legs, while Cody stood holding her hind legs. And the vet pulled out a scalpel that looked comically small next to our sow and began to cut across her midline through skin and muscle before exposing her sternum and rib cage. At this point, the vet walked back to her truck and came back with a pair of basically really big wire cutters. And this was the first time she turned and looked at me and said, "This might get a little graphic." So after cutting through her ribs and exposing her internal organs, we begin to root around for a cause of death. Each time she comes across a new organ, the vet points out what it is, tells us about it, and I'm feeling slightly sickened by the whole thing. But more so, I'm like, whoa, this is pretty cool. And as we're looking, we notice that there are tiny dots speckling all of the organs, which the vet exclaimed were blood clots. And upon further examination, she determined that the sow died of sepsis. But we still didn't know a point of infection, and we wanted to figure out what happened, so we kept looking. And then we're moving along, and her lower intestines, bladder, and uterus seem to be the most infected areas. And the vet finally finds a small tear in her uterus, which must have been the point of infection. Cody and I look at each other without saying a word. I know we're both thinking the same thing. This boar has had aggressive tendencies before, and we fear that he may have been the cause of her death. After we wrap up with the vet and thank her for her time, Cody turns to me and says, "Well, looks like you can go bury her in the compost pile." So I head down in the skid steer. I place her on the ground so I can dig out a little spot at the bottom of the pile, gently pick her up, and finally place her in her resting spot before covering her up. And the whole time I'm doing this, I'm thinking about her and her life and how it ended and how I ended up here doing this. That evening, I went home and I recounted this story to my parents and sister, telling them all the gruesome details. And my sister, who works in a bakery, said, "Well, I got to make cookies and macarons all day while you buried a pig in a compost pile." So it's funny that this dark and pretty sad moment made me reflect and think about the work I was doing, and from that reflection think, well, this is work I might want to continue. In farming, I've experienced life and growth, death and change, and opportunities to learn from and live with the plants and animals around me. Thank you.
I love it. Who was brought right back to like 8th grade biology class, right? With the little, yeah, I did the little, it was the baby pig, right? Yeah. I had the smell that came right back to me too, yeah. Thank you for that. Really wonderful details. You really fleshed it out. I mean, nobody got nauseous though. I mean, everyone, no, it wasn't too graphic. No, that's great. Perfect. All right. Our next story is going to feature Gwen featuring as a translator once again. And this storyteller is another farmer from the Solidarity Farm. So please welcome Delinx Cherami with Gwendolyn Van Sant.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Mi nombre es Cherami. Vengo de Haití.
His name is Cherami, comes from Haiti.
Me siento abrumado para una alegría y extrema felicidad por poder compartir un parte de mi historia con ustedes. Cuando era pequeña, tenía 5 años, mi padre me llevaba al campo para trabajar la tierra, pero no me gustaba. Cuando tenía 14 años, me encantó la agricultura y yo vi sin agricultura no podía tener una buena vida. Yo empecé a trabajar.
I am overwhelmed with joy to have the opportunity to share my story with you. When I was 5 years old, my dad used to take me to the country to work on the land, and I didn't like it. But when I turned 14, I grew to love agriculture. I saw that without agriculture, there wasn't a pathway to a good life, and I began to get to work.
Mi sueño era estudiar la agronomía, pero no tenía la posibilidad de estudiar agronomía. Vine aquí y yo quise aprovechar la oportunidad que me ofrece Buech. La agricultura en Haití, mi país, es muy diferente de aquí por parte de clima. Haití es un país de piedra y de montaña. Aprendí a cultivar acá porque Buech me dio un espacio en Solidarity Farm y Garden.
My dream was to study agronomy. I can't ever say that. Did I get it? Agronomy. But I didn't have the opportunity to study. I have come here and I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity that Bridge gave me. The agricultural climate is different here than in my country. Haiti is mountainous and rocky. I learned a lot about how to grow here because Bridge gave me a plot at the Solidarity Farm and Garden.
Vale mucho esta oportunidad tener tierra en mi país. Cuando no hay lluvia, no podía vivir ni trabajar. Tuvimos río o acceso a agua. Aquí es diferente. Tenemos acceso al agua aquí en la granja solidaria. También, Buech me dio la oportunidad de tomar clase en Production Safety en la universidad. Eso es parte de mi sueño. Quiero seguir con mi estudio y completar mi sueño con un diploma en agronomía. Tenía la oportunidad de caminar en la granja con un profesor de Chile que tiene su diploma y eso es quiero yo. En Buech soy la coordinador de la granja y significa que yo soy responsable.
This opportunity to have land has been really significant. In my country, when there wasn't rain, one couldn't survive or work. We didn't have a river or access to water. Here it's different. Bridge gave me the opportunity to take produce safety class at the university, and this was my dream manifest. I want to continue learning and complete my dream with an agronomy degree. At Solidarity Farm, I had the opportunity to walk with a professor from Brown University who has an agronomy degree, and that is what I want as well. At Bridge, I am the coordinator for the garden, and that means I take care of the Solidarity Farm and Garden and steward the care of the plants.
Yo quiero compartir cómo me importa la granja en parte de mi vida y mi familia ahora. Tengo un espacio y siembra maíz, tomate, sweet potato, ocra, caña, perejil y repollo. Y de mi país, calabaza, se llama carbaluz. Me dará mucha alegría sembrar los vegetales de mi país como Lalo. Es muy importante compartir nuestra cultura y mostrar al pueblo cómo no importa la agricultura. Más tarde, ustedes van a probar un plato típico de Haití con ingredientes de nuestro jardín solidario, picris preparado por mi esposa y mi compatriota Luria.
I'm going to share how much the farm means to me and my family. I have my own plot, and I planted corn, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, okra, sugarcane, cabbage, parsley, and jute, and a special squash from Haiti, calvados. It is very important to share our culture and how important agriculture is. Later, we will share a typical dish from Haiti grown in our Solidarity Farm and Gardens, piclis, that was prepared by my wife Marcelene y Ludia.
Me gustaría invitar a ustedes a venir a visitar nuestros jardines. Hemos hecho mucho con flores y ahora me encantan los flores. Aprendí también de la tradición de los indígenas de los Estados Unidos. Hice otro espacio de las 3 hermanas y bendicemos de la lengua de indígena, criollo, español y inglés. También usamos el maíz y variedad de ocra para limitar del espacio. Aprendí es una forma de campeón planting.
I'd like to invite you all to come and visit our farm and gardens. We have done a lot with flowers, and now I love flowers. I learned a lot about indigenous traditions of the U.S. I made a plot, I made an extra plot of the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, and we blessed the farm and garden in indigenous languages, Creole, Spanish, and English. We also use corn and okra varieties to make the borders of our spaces. I learned this is a form of companion planting.
Agradezco a todos, especialmente a Gwendolyn y el equipo de Bridge. Para mí es una experiencia muy importante en mi vida. También agradezco a mi compatriota Steve y Nick para siempre estar conmigo en Bridge, y a Gregory, con quien empezamos nuestro espacio compartir el año pasado, mi primer año. Y finalmente, los agradecimientos a mi familia, Marcelene y Daisy.
So thank you, everyone, especially Gwendolyn and the Bridge team. For me, this is one of the most important experiences in my life. I always thank my colleagues Steve and Nick for always being with me on our work at Bridge. Thank you, Gregory, with whom we started our first shared plots last year, my first year at the Farm and Garden. And finally, my most heartfelt thanks to my wife, Marcelene y Daisy.
Muchas gracias. So I will also just point out that Spanish is not Cherami's first language, nor is it her second. It's third language. Amazing. Thank you very much. And I would love everyone. So that's a real invitation? We can all come and check out the farm.
Yes.
I'll check out the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Soon, in the next few days, yeah. Preferably after it rains. Rain? Wonderful. Okay, our next storyteller, change of pace, change of accent, is going to be from via Northern England. Please welcome cow farmer Paul Paisley.
Thank you very much. Makes you want to do a hootenanny in front of this thing. Man of constant sorrow. So I want to go back a few years to my introduction to farming. I'm not from a farming family. My first choice of career would have been in rural England, a gamekeeper, which I don't know if you have that over here, but it would be back there, it would be big fancy estates, and because I love to fish since I was this big, a gamekeeper would basically spend most of his time fishing, and he'd raise birds in the winter time to let out that that the rich folk could shoot, but most of the time he was fishing. So I thought that was a great career, and also wanted to get out of high school when I was 16. So you had to make a good effort to get yourself a job for a week, and you had to do the legwork. You had to show that you actually got a job. It got signed off, and then when you turned 16, you could leave, and that's what I wanted. So the gamekeeper idea kind of fell flat because I wrote 20 letters. 20 letters came back saying the same thing, that there was no apprenticeships. It was passed down father to son. So, so the next thing was my dad was saying, look, I know the police chief. We can get you into the police department. Good solid career, good pension, fairly easy gig. So we went along there. I went along there with him reluctantly, and but I thought, you know what, because I'd been fishing most of all my life, I was like, I could walk the streets and be a bobby, outside, and so we get there, and I'm telling my idea to the police chief, and he says to my dad, he says, my dad's Brian, he says, Brian, just one problem here. What's that, Bill? He says, well, your son's too short to be a policeman. And he said, actually, too short to be a policewoman. So he says, but he says, we can get you a clerk position. And I said, well, what's that? And sitting in an office rolling a pen around. I said, that's it. And I was telling this to my grandmother, and she said, look, I know a pigeon fancier that runs a farm just up the river. I'll have a word with him. And so anyhow, that was my introduction to farming. My dad took me up there. We knocked on the farmhouse door, and he was expecting us. Here's a young fella that's coming along, wants to work for a week and get out of school. Well, he said, this is a livestock farm. That didn't mean nothing to me. And, I went there and he said, show up 7 o'clock Monday morning. So I go there. And, I mean, it was an absolute greenhorn. Didn't know a heifer calf from anything. I didn't know anything about farm animals. And here I am, just mucking in. There was a herd of 200 British pedigree registered British Frisian milk cows. And for back then, this is 45 years ago. That was a big herd in Northumberland. And so you got 200 cows, you've got 200 calves. That's how you get milk. You got to have a calf. They don't just give it to you. So anyway, my job for a week was help. There was a herdsman, an assistant herdsman, a head tractor man, and an assistant tractor man, and I was the young'un. And the young'un did whatever. Go help him, run around here. The gopher, we call it here. And so that was my introduction to farming, was, feeding 60 calves. Run down to the milk house, get the milk, bring it up, bucket feed these calves. And, and when I left school, actually the end of that week, the farmer came to me and he said, would you consider coming here after you get done with school? So at 16 years old, I started work there. And absolutely learned my work ethic, and just, it suited me. And I kind of fell into it by accident. So I basically, lived, ate, slept cattle. I got every book on how to make milk and how to raise calves, and just learn from the old timers, and so then I got to be in charge of the calf buyer and making sure that every newborn calf got its mother's colostrum, and just raising calves. And then, as the time went on, I learned how to milk the cows, and then learned how to, they had, as time went on, as I was, as the years went on, the farmer transitioned more from the British Frisian to the American Holstein. Well, it was actually a Canadian Holstein bull that he had flown over and quarantined, and collected a lot of semen off that. I learned how to artificially inseminate, and basically just made a career out of milking cows. And it was just from day one, just learning to operate a tractor and all the machinery. I mean, when you got 200 cows, everything you do on that farm is for the cows. It was there was 60 acres right around the farm that was basically, you'd move them around. 200 cows takes a lot of feeding. So you'd bring, in the spring, summer, and autumn, you'd cart in grass. And, that was called zero grazing. The cows were on the 60 acres around the barn, but it wasn't enough to feed them, so you'd bring feed in. You'd bring straight up grass in the spring, summer, and autumn. In the winter, they were getting grass silage. So it was basically a grass diet that these cows were on 12 months a year. And they calved primarily in the spring. It was probably 75% in the spring and 25% in the autumn. And that way there was a good solid year-round milk supply. And back then, there was a milk quota, so you could produce up to a certain amount, and that's what the farmer tried to do, was to keep the milk flow into there. So that was my education into farming. And John Gray, he would tell me, he said, looking after cows is 75% observation and 25% hard work. And when you're a 17-year-old kid and you're busting your ass, moving stuff around, you think, what the hell is he talking about? But he was absolutely right. It's observation is everything. If you can spot a cow in heat and get her bred that day, if you can see something's off its grub, you can get a handle on it. There's a lot of signs, and unless you're aware of them signs, you're going to fall behind. And he also said that the difference between a farmer that's going to make it and a farmer that doesn't is about 10 days. And that has always stuck with me. And I think that holds true, today. So that was in retrospect, I didn't understand it as a kid, but I do now. And thank you.
Thank you, Paul. All right. Well, from Northern England to a more local story. And I'll just pause here for a moment to say that after the event, there will be all sorts of materials on the table here, including pictures not only from Ana Lucia's plot, but from Cherami's as well. There's two separate beautifully done photo collages. So please check those out when you're after the show as well. All right. Our next storyteller is the owner of Cow Pots, which you might be familiar with. Please welcome Amanda Freund.
A couple years ago, my parents were planning to go away on vacation together without their children for the first time, which is notable because I'm turning 41 this week. So, like many farms, ours is a family business, and in preparation for leaving, my dad approached me to make sure that I was comfortable taking on his responsibilities for the week and a half that he was away. Important note, he's the guy in the blue shirt with a cow on it. So I assured him, no problem, I got this. I really wanted him to feel confident and comfortable about taking this vacation. It's important to understand that my role on the farm is largely administrative, so I do the bookkeeping, the sales and marketing, and as was mentioned, the business that we're operating is cow pots. So we're actually manufacturing biodegradable pots from cow manure. So covering for my coworker in this case did not mean responding to emails and sending out estimates. You can imagine in a business that makes pots out of cow manure, it meant moving shit, literally. The task, in essence, was simple. I basically needed to go to the dairy barn where we have 300 cows And an important note for those of you who are not as familiar with dairy cows, one cow produces about 100 pounds of manure a day, and there are 300 of them in that barn. So there's a pit that receives that manure because there's these alley scrapers that act like squeegees that help clean out the alleys, but it's our job to then pump it out of the barn each day, and then it goes into our manure truck. So it's a 4,500 gallon tanker that sits on a truck body, and I just had to drive it a few hundred feet away to where our methane digester is. And there's a receiving pit to then pump that manure there, right? Pretty basic. Moving manure from barn a few hundred feet away. So while I don't operate equipment on our farm every day, technically I know how to, which is, I thought, sufficient. So yeah, day one, it's important to know, I guess, over the course of the first few days, we went from whoops to oh my God. So day one, I roll up to the barn, I turn on the agitator because if you all are envisioning like nice, stiff cow patties, that's not what I'm working with. This is soupy, sloppy, slurry, okay? So I turn on the agitator because I need to get all the solids and fibers back in suspension. So that's going for 10 minutes. And then I open up the valve, which pumps the manure from that pit through a pipe into that manure tanker truck. Y'all, I am a millennial. I pass the time by looking at reels on Instagram. So I am watching videos of somebody making the best sourdough bread ever, and one reel leads to 3, and I've lost track of time, and out of the corner of my eye, I see manure now bubbling over top of the truck. Whoops. I immediately turn off the pump, and I've acknowledged that I have a bit of a puddle in the driveway. But it's February in Connecticut. That will freeze and be easier to clean up in a few days. So I move that load of manure to the digester. The rest of the day goes pretty smoothly. Day 2, I am committed to not making the same mistake that I made on day 1, so the phone stays in my pocket. I do not look at any Instagram videos during the course of moving manure. So I turn on the agitator, open up the valve, load up the truck, do not spill a drop. I drive over to our digester, I back up flawlessly, and there's a stinger, so it's a pipe that rests on top of that tanker, and it basically has a remote control that I can go up, down, side to side. So I lift up the stinger, I rotate it so that the spout is over the receiving end of the digester, so that when I turn on the pump, the manure will pump out of that truck through that spout into the digester. So I turn on the pump, rev up the engine to 1,600 RPM, whatever that means. And I look out my passenger side mirror, and there's nothing coming out of that spout. But I can hear that there's massive volumes of liquid splattering somewhere. So I look out my driver's side mirror, and I discover that, whoops, I'm filling the concrete pad next to the digester with manure. So I immediately turn off that pump, and I discover that there's 2 other buttons on my handy-dandy remote that would be very relevant to this situation. S is for spread, which is the function you want to be in when you're going out to the field to apply manure to the field. Function I'm in currently. N is for nurse, which is where I'd prefer to be, and that's what diverts the manure through the pipe so that it would actually come through the spout. So, no problem. It's February in Connecticut. That will freeze. I'll scrape it up and clean it up in a few days. And so I emptied the rest of the truckload into where it meant to go. Day 3. At this point, I'm feeling pretty confident because how many other ways can you mess this up? Like, I've done it. I've done the mistakes. I can't possibly make another mistake. So I turn on the agitator, I open the valve, I fill the truck, I don't spill a drop. I drive it to the digester, back up flawlessly. I truly am actually a very good equipment operator. And I have pushed that N button for nurse about 15 times because I am not going to spread more manure around the digester. We're going to get it all in the digester. And I go to push up on my remote, and that stinger, that pipe, will not budge. And I think, aha, here it is. It's February in Connecticut. It's frozen. So I call in some reinforcements, and in drives the skid steer with a set of forks. And so I guide him in so that the forks are resting just above the tanker and below the stinger so that together, as I push the up button and he lifts up on the forks, we'll get that stinger up. So 1, 2, 3, go. Oh my God. There is a literal shitstorm. Turns out the reason that I could not lift the stinger is because I never turned the pump off from the day before. So it was weighed down with all the manure that was already circulating through the pipe, and it was too heavy for my little hydraulic motor thing to lift it up. And so it's become acutely aware to me now that it was just loaded with manure, and all of that manure is now enveloping the whole front of the truck, and just my luck, it was just barely warm enough on this February day that I left both the passenger side and the driver's side door open. So manure is not just enveloping the cab, it's also entering the cab. And the only way to resolve this situation is to dive right in. I have to get into that cab and I need to turn off that pump. And that's what I did. So I wiped off my glasses. I finished the job. I went home and took a shower and changed my clothes to complete the rest of my day. But luckily, that was only day 3 of my parents being away in Iceland enjoying the northern lights in the middle of February. And so I had a whole week ahead of me to scrape up the concrete pad, clean up the driveway. I used up an entire bottle of Windex cleaning the cab of that truck. But I actually deemed it a successful week for me because I never once had to call him or disrupt his vacation. And when he came home and did his first day of chores back, he actually asked me why the truck was so clean. So if I did not do an adequate job of describing, I've made some visuals. These are real life images of the chaos and destruction of those 3 days, and I'll just pass it around so you can enjoy.
Oh my God, Amanda. Amazing. Let's give another round of applause for Amanda, shall we? So this is Dad right here. Your dad, yeah. So did you sense that something was off?
No, the truck was cleaner than it had ever been.
Yeah. That wasn't suspicious.
Well, I assumed because she had her dog in there and it was probably melting the windows and you couldn't
Oh,
see out.
yeah, very innocent explanation. Okay, well, very trusting dad. All right, our next storyteller, first time here at April Hill Farm, I believe. Please welcome up farmer Monti Lawson.
My name is Monti Lawson. I use he, him pronouns and wanted to share a little bit about the story of how I arrived here. So, like many of the folks here, I'm the wearer of many hats, some of which include being the founder and lead land steward of a farm called Catalyst Collaborative Farm, which is being incubated on 2.8 acres of land at a larger project called Wild Seed Community Farm in Hilling Village, which, for those who don't know, is 181 acres of liberated land for farmers, healers, and artists in the Mid-Hudson Valley. So my journey began in 2013. I was living in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and was hosting a monthly dinner party. And the herbs would go bad before I could use them all, so I kind of started with one cilantro plant in my window and was like, I wonder what happens next. So based on my personality, I ended up doing a 6-month farm apprenticeship at a farm called Bushwick Campus Farm, like that same year. That apprenticeship was actually led by a person named Maggie Cheney, and there's a person named Dee Rooney, who is in my cohort. The two of them went on to be co-founders of a farm called Rocksteady Farm, which some of y'all might know. So yeah, I stayed in the city and was doing development work by day, and community gardening was kind of like my escape from all of that computer work. So over time, I kind of just got the itch to kind of move upstate and to farm at a larger scale. So in 2022, ended up doing a program called Farm School in New York City, where I was able to kind of deepen my knowledge of both farming and do a lot of community building. So that summer, my partner and I went to visit a farm near Albany, where a friend of mine was the first Black woman in New York State to get a license to grow cannabis. And so we really wanted to go check it out. It was my partner's first time being on a farm. We fell in love with it. The day before, I actually got to visit Soulfire Farm for the first time and literally kissed the ground when I was there. So at that farm, was able to connect with some amazing people, including a person named Sarah Elizabeth, who has now been farming upstate for 2 decades and had built out what she calls the network for Black women and their supporters, basically. So she's telling all this story about how she's building all these relationships and she's always showing up for people. And I'd heard a lot of promises before, so didn't think anything of it. So come that November, as I was finishing farm school and wondering what the next step was, I go to one of my homies' events, a fall event, and see Sarah again there. And I'm explaining farm school's about to end and I don't know what my next step is. And she was like, there's a place called Wild Seed and it needs someone like that, someone like you. It's 181 acres. So I'm very delusional. So I was like, my 2 garden beds that are 8x4 are totally enough prep for what I'm going to be doing, right? So when my partner and I came up a couple weeks later to visit Wild Seed for the first time, when I was looking at the map, I was like, I think Maggie's in that area. So when I put in the address was the first time that I realized that Rocksteady was literally the farm right next door. And so I've been able to lean on them for technical support, tractor support, starting my plants in their greenhouse, really thankful to be in deep community like that. So my first year of farming up here was 2023. For those who can remember, it was a very terrible year to be your first year farming because, as I was saying, I'm coming up here bright-eyed, bushy-tailed with not a lot of experience of growing at scale. So my partner and I spent $15,000 on compost and tractor work, and then we got not one but 2 once in 500-year floods back to back. And the land that I'm growing on has very heavy clay soil and is what's called highly erodible land. So all of that air that we had been pumping into that soil was immediately compacted by all the rain. All that compost that had been lovingly put out perfectly was sliding straight down the hill. So there was a moment where I had to really dig deep to figure out if I was built for this. At the time, I should note, I still had my apartment in the city. So it was open question. But yeah, I was able to dig deep both within myself and also realize that a lot of the advice that I had been given over and over again was don't do anything your first year, just learn the land. But I'm I have a 1-year lease at the time, pressures of capitalism, I'm not going to listen. And so I kind of always sit with that moment to just remember that even though I came here and had a vision and tried to imprint that on the land, it was the land very, very clearly told me to slow down, to actually learn it, and to also like dig deep both within myself, but also in like how I thought about the work. And so instead of having a 1-year focus on how much I can extract out of the land, to take a long-term view and like focus on how much that we can put into the land before we ask to extract from it. So got our first big harvest this year. It only took me 3 seasons. The other part of that work was also like building down in terms of like adding cover crops and like getting some healthy root action, but also building across. So we are in the process of building a cooperative called the Weebatuck Valley Farm Collaborative that includes Rocksteady Farm, Sweet Freedom Farm, Wild Seed Community Farm, and Callus Collaborative Farm. Last year, with the support of Kara and some other folks from BAV, our organization was able to win $2.2 million from the USDA to actually build out a food hub. Yeah. And yeah, also have been able to have my life made so much easier through connections like Gwendolyn at Bridge, like Berkshire Chitana Community Foundation, BAV, as I mentioned. So yeah, really thankful to be in this like space and wanted to end with some offerings. The farm that I'm at is called Wild Seed, so wildseedcommunity.org. We have an upcoming community workday next Friday, actually, and would love to have folks on the land. We're actually going to be honoring Sarah Elizabeth, the person who connected me to that land. And the other offering is more for the future, but if you know anyone or are a donor organizer yourself, we are about to launch a $5 million capital campaign to like build out this like food hub and have other farmers like in this area to be able to participate in it. So really could love some other support on that journey. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Monty. That's a hard act to follow. And a reminder that after, we're about to come up on our final storyteller. So immediately following, there is, remember, lots of information back there. I'm going to invite everybody who made this event possible up here just at the end to just introduce themselves quickly. And we've got lots of food, a full-on meal that has been prepared by folks at the farm, and other goodies as well. So please partake after the event. And so without further ado, I'm going to welcome to the stage for our final storyteller, Stephanie Wright.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm going to be telling you about my time at the Solidarity Garden. You see, I was one of the pioneers in that garden right from the beginning, with the thistles and thorns and the trees and the roots and the digging and the prodding, and that sweat equity was very real when we first got there. I really it didn't look like we would ever really get through. But do you know that garden started to take root? I started with a raised bed. I was next to the fence. I was 3 down on the left-hand side. And there was these wonderful women there with me. And Gwendolyn was in that garden with us. Now, did I tell you about all them weeds that we found? There were plenty of weeds. And I liked the stinging nettle. But the ladies that were in there from the different cultures, they were starting to teach me about these other weeds that I didn't know. Now, I liked the dandelions. When no one else liked those dandelions, I was picking those dandelions all the time because I could fritter them, I could make syrup with them, and I made tea with them. So I was the one who was going around with those dandelions. Now, while I was down there, my son died during the pandemic in 22. That garden started in 2020. And I was grieving very hard for my son. So Gwendolyn gave me that plot of land. And I said, okay, I'm going to put my grief in that land. And so I actually called that land Kendall Way. So I could have him in that garden with me as a partner when no one else was in that garden. It was me and Kendall. So the reason why I'm telling you all this too is that when Kendall was little, we had a garden. I was there with my son. I had 2 sons, Kendall and Corey. And my father had one side of the garden, I had the other, so it was a big plot of land. So I knew how Kendall worked in the garden, very meticulous, he wanted it just so. But he always complained about his brother Corey. Because you see, Corey liked to gather the snakes and the frogs, and he thought he would take them to the apartment and throw them around. But that wasn't going to be. So those 2 sons had different thoughts in the garden. So, as a grieving mother, I watched that black, fertile land grow the teeniest, tiny green plants. And those plants got into adolescence. And then those plants came to be mature. And I got to harvest that food, that succulent food. It was delicious and it was flavorful. And I also had my sisters with me from different cultures, and they were teaching me different plants. So I got to be a really rounded cook, starting to know all those things. The food from the other cultures I was able to experience was overwhelming, and I thank Gwendolyn for that, because she had the mind that we were all going to be down there and we were all going to experience all the foods. So I have to tell you another part of that story. See, my father came with me all the time to that garden, and at that time he was 91. And he would walk up and down between the gardens, and he would talk to all the different gardeners that were in there. But through the years, he got weak, and he couldn't walk up and down. The children especially wanted to see him when he was in that garden. So when he didn't show up, they were pretty sad. They wanted to wait for the next time to see him. So now my father, he satisfies himself to sit in the car and watch. So he watches all the gardeners, and he's very observant, and he can tell me who was in the garden, what they were doing, what's growing, what's coming next. But I also would like to tell you, too, that when my father was able to walk up and down in those gardens, we were growing okra, and he's from the South, so he knows how okra is supposed to look and what it's supposed to look like. And so we were growing these okra, and they were getting long and hard. My father was like, absolutely not. That is not how okra is supposed to. It's supposed to be little, tiny, soft, succulent plant, fruitage. So now I'm going to give this talk to my son, Kendall. We love you, Kendall, and we miss you very much, our family. But we know where we can find you, down in that garden at the Solidarity Garden.
And Stephanie, how old is your dad?
96.
96. So how's the okra? How's the okra?
How's the garden going, Dad? You got some words to tell them?
Very good.
It's going very good. Yeah, you approve of the okra?
Do you approve of the okra now?
Yes.
Oh, good. It's improved. Okay, good. Excellent. All right. So before I invite all of the makers of this feast to come up and introduce themselves, let's just give another round of applause for all the storytellers. Susan, Dicken, Anna, Louisa, Maeve, Cherami, Paul, Amanda, Monti, and Stephanie. Thank you. It takes a lot of courage to come up and tell your story, and no matter what your story is. So if anybody's interested in telling your own, please approach me after and ask me about how to do that. I'm always looking for new storyteller converts. So please now, the folks who made this event possible, come on up and introduce yourselves.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Buzansky, and I'm with Berkshire Agricultural Ventures.
Beth Carlson. I am the Director of Operations for Berkshire Community Land Trust, and I'm here on behalf of our Farmsteads for Farmers initiative.
I'm Margaret Moulton. I'm the Executive Director at Berkshire Grown.
Hi, I'm Gwendolyn Van Sant, CEO and Founding Director of Bridge.
I already introduced myself, but I would be remiss if I didn't introduce our farm team, Sarah, Nicole, and Iris. Anybody else here from our farm team? Anyway, raise your hands if you can see them. They're out there. And And there's still beautiful light as you mingle and mix. Feel free to take a pass through the garden. And I do want to give special credit to Maeve, who told the story, but also was the inspiration for our first storytelling last year. And if it continues, which I think it will, she gets full credit.
Also,
don't forget that there's incredible food.
Eat the food.
Drink the cheese.
Oh. What?
I just wanted, I was suggesting that we say where the food came from, and maybe I'll just start with Bridge. That I want to, Marcelin and Ludia, I don't know where they are, but they made pickles and plantains. And then another person that's not here, Maria Lopez, also made some delicious salads from the Solidarity Farm and Garden. Yeah, so I wanted you all to know that.
There's cheese from Chase Holden Farm, which is just over the border in New York State.
Yes. And cider and donuts from Freund Farm.
Yes.
And crudité from here.
Yeah.